Welcome back. We've now gone through all this work to make these IK rigs for both Echo and the Mixamo skeletal meshes. It's now time to use these by retargeting those Mixamo animations over to Echo. And to do that, we need to make something called an IK Retargeter. We're going to go into XBot, into Rigs, and make this new IK Retargeter for the Mixamo skeletal mesh. So we can right-click, go to Animation, and select IK Retargeter, selecting XBot. That's because XBot is the source of the animation. So we're going to select that and call this RTG for Retargeter XBot. And let's open RTG XBot. And we see the XBot skeletal mesh. Now notice in the Details panel, we have the source IK rig asset, and it's set to XBot. And it's grayed out. We can't change it. That's because this is the source. But the target IK rig asset can be changed, and we're going to select IK Echo. And as soon as we do, we see the Echo skeletal mesh right here next to XBot. And we can also scroll down in the Details panel and change things such as the target actor offset. We can scrub left and right and move Echo farther away. I'm going to leave it at about 150. We could even change the target actor scale. If I change that to 2, Echo's much bigger. I'm going to leave it at 1 though. And we can see what happens if we retarget these animations from the Mixamo XBot skeletal mesh over to Echo. But the thing is, notice they're in different poses. XBot is in a T pose. The body is shaped like a T. But Echo is actually in an A pose. The body is shaped like an A. So if we retarget the animations like this, well, we might get less than desirable results. For example, we can see what a retargeted animation would look like by going to the Asset Browser and double-clicking on the corresponding animation. Notice that even though Echo is animating like this standing idle animation, the arms are too far in, which means those starting poses were off. So we can go up to the top and click Edit Pose, and if we do that, we suddenly see all the bones, and we can move them. Now, the bones themselves are scaled too big, and that's because in Details, the bone draw size is set to 8 by default, but we can set this to a lower value so we can actually see those bones. Setting it to a value of, say, 1 allows us to see those bones a little bit better. Now, in Edit Pose mode, we can change the poses of the bones. And in fact, we can change the pose and save it as a pose. Right now, we're in something called the default pose. But if we click New Pose, we're asked for a name for the new pose, and we can call this new pose To Echo. And if we click OK, we now have this To Echo pose, and if we want, we can switch back to the default pose, and we can have multiple poses saved in this retargeter asset for different purposes. Now, we're going to click Edit Pose in the To Echo pose, and we'd like to get Echo to be in roughly the same pose as XBot. So what I'm going to do is select the upper arm bone and move it up. Only I want snapping so I can move both arms by the same amount. So I'm going to enable snapping and set this to increments of 5 so I can have fine-tuned control. And I'm going to move it up until the arm is about level. So I'd say about 45 degrees for the left arm and 45 degrees for the right arm. Now if I click on Edit Pose, we'll see how she looks, and already the pose is looking a bit better. Now you can spend a lot of time tweaking these poses until they get just right. For example, I could move the clavicles up slightly if I wanted to, say 5 degrees each, and click Edit Pose to see how that looks. So I can toggle back and forth between the pose and the animation itself by clicking Edit Pose. Now I'm noticing the fingers look a little strange, and if I go back to Edit Pose and look from the top, we'll see that the arms are not straight for Echo, but they are for XBot. So we can take those arms and move them out by about 30 degrees or so to roughly match XBot's pose. And if we click Edit Pose and go back, we'll see that those fingers look a lot better. So that's looking great. So this shows us what those animations would look like retargeted. We can even take a look at the attack animation. And we see that it looks pretty good. So I'm happy with these. So it's time to actually retarget these. Now, in order to do that, We select all the animations we want here, and we click this icon, Export Selected Animations, and it's going to ask us where we'd like to export them to. So I'd like a folder to put these new retargeted animations in. So I'm going to go up to Blueprints, Characters, and make a new folder here called Animations. We'll send those retargeted animations to that folder. So I'll click Export Selected Animations, go to Blueprints, Characters, Animations, and click OK. And now we have two new animations. Let's double click on Standing Idle Retargeted and check this out. Echo is now animated with our Mixamo animation, which is great. And we can even change the position of that socket so it looks better. I'm going to stop the animation by clicking on the red scrub handle here so I can move that socket. I'm going to search in the hierarchy for right hand and select right hand socket, and I can even move it here. So I'd like to do that, but I'd like to disable snapping and see if I can get this looking good. So this looks good here in the idle animation, but there was a reason I decided to retarget that melee attack. Because if we press play, we need to see if that animation looks good with the position of the sword, especially when swinging the sword. Because right about here, we want to make sure that the sword is oriented in a way that it looks like it's going to cut something. And we see that it's kind of off here. So we can pause right here at this crucial moment and adjust the sword here. And that'll be ultimately the best position for it. So I'm going to go ahead and tweak this until it looks good. And after tweaking for a little bit, I can now play the animation and see what it looks like. And I can click off of that socket to see if it looks better without the distraction of the gizmo. And I notice that about right here, it looks a little bit angled upward, and I think I'd like to change that. So I'm going to get that socket and tweak it some more. And I think that's looking pretty good. So I'm pretty satisfied with that. And I can go back to my idle animation and make sure that the sword looks good in the hand, and I see that it does. In fact, all the fingers are wrapped around it nicely. So now we have our socket positioned correctly, and we know how it's going to look in the hands of Echo when swinging a sword and also idling and holding a sword. So this is great. This is the next step to being able to do combat with melee weapons like swords, and we now know how to get more animations in and retarget it to Echo. And the good news is we did all this hard work up front. We don't have to make a new IK rig or IK Retargeter each time we get new animations. All we need to do is download those animations and open the retargeter and click one button, and we have them retargeted over to Echo, which is awesome. So we're one step closer to combat. Excellent job. I'll see you in the next video.